Bhatti, who is a member of the Domestic Workers Action Group, is going to address you now. Mariamm came to Ireland from South Africa a number of years ago, and like other migrant women who travel from one country to another, she didn't know a lot about Ireland or about the terms and conditions that she would meet once she came here. Indeed, it's an experience also of many Irish women, and for me, looking at that video, I'm very conscious of the numbers of Irish women who have given their lives working in domestic service, and also of the way in which a number of other Irish women have been privileged and supported by women, by migrant women like Mariamm over the past 20 years to be able to continue with their work outside the home while somebody else did work for us inside the home. But Mariamm ended up in conditions that she would not have wished to end up in and was not very well treated. But while she was staying in a shelter, she became involved with the Migrants' Rights Centre Ireland and the Domestic Workers Action Group. And she now represents the Migrants' Rights Centre Ireland and the Domestic Workers Action Group on issues of human rights and domestic work here and internationally. Just this last month, Mariamm has started with ourselves in Maynooth as a full-time student on the BA in Community Work and Youth Work, which is a 3-year degree, and we're very, very glad to have her as part of that group. Mariamm.
Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. It's always an honor to be able to come here and share experiences, but not for the sake of sharing experiences, to try and empower other women and to make sure that what happened to me and many other women that work as domestic workers in private homes doesn't happen in future. Well, there will always be such cases, but we try and make sure that we give as much information and as much support as we can. I feel really privileged to be here today and seeing Anastasia today, who is the head of the Social Studies Department, where I just started my course. In the morning, I felt like sharing a platform with the headmistress at my school. I would like to congratulate Fakre as well for the speech in the morning. Honestly, I found that there is a lot of similarities in the experiences of migrant women all over the world. The issues are always almost the same. I can never really describe enough the sacrifices that migrant women make to leave their countries, to go and work in other countries, to embrace a new country, a new culture, a new language, new challenges as well. My God, it's not just women like ourselves coming from the third world to the first world. Whoever met those numbers that there's the first world, second or third, whatever, I don't like them. It's not just, like I said, women coming from developed countries. It's everywhere. It could be women from here. We know that Irish women themselves have had these experiences in the last years, hundreds years, going to other countries to look for work when opportunities were not that good in Ireland. And we know that their experiences were not that great. And many of these women, really, they would go to countries, and some of them would get a good experience, meet nice people, work for good families, and then reach their dreams, and others end in situations that are really, really hard to even talk about. Others find themselves in situations where they have no control of their lives anymore, like myself and many other women found themselves or have found themselves. I'll give you, before I go to what we do as Domestic Workers Action Group, I'll give you examples of 3 videos that I watched a few days ago. The reason I watched them was just to educate myself and also to see what the issues are. And my findings were really that the issues are always the same in domestic workers. There can be small differences here and there. I watched a video of a woman, an Ethiopian woman called Mariamm. The video has been on YouTube for a while. She was seen in the video being dragged by her employer. She worked as a domestic worker. And in the video, she was being dragged by her employer with her hair. She was being shoved into a car in front of the embassy of the country where she worked in Lebanon as a domestic worker. And she was screaming and kicking, and she was being forced. According to the employer, they wanted to take her to the airport. And in my thinking, when I saw the employer being interviewed a few days later, all these cameras and microphones in front of him, and I thought, and where is Mariamm, who is representing her, and who is saying, where is her side of the story? You hear the employer wearing big glasses and wearing big clothes, expensive clothes, saying, oh, she was this, she was that. And it was sad when I watched that, and also to hear that 5 days later she committed suicide because she couldn't take it anymore. And it's women like those. The second example was a woman from the Philippines who had a child who was having a heart problem. And because the family were struggling, so she decided to take a job in Saudi Arabia. She went leaving her husband and 3 children behind with a small child who wasn't feeling well. And when she got there, because the employer paid for her transport and everything, the plane tickets, she had to work for 7 months without any pay. Had to change religion from being a Catholic to a Muslim and all that. For 2 years, the family never heard of her. They didn't know where she was. And she got sexually abused by the eldest child of the family she worked for. The boy was 17. And she said she could not report because in countries like Saudi Arabia, and I'm not saying this that I have anything against, I'm just saying of that video that I saw, she was afraid to report because she would not be believed, because obviously a domestic worker is just seen as this person of no value in the society by some people. So she was afraid to report that she was not going to be believed. And if she was not going to be believed, the sentence that she could end up facing for telling lies, she could have her tongue cut, so she didn't want that. So she kept quiet for years until her family started looking for her in the Philippines, and they discovered after 2 years that she was being held a slave there. She went back home in shambles with nothing. The last example I would like to give was a woman from Sri Lanka that was also working in the Lebanon, and she said one of the days she was working, doing housekeeping and all that, the hours of rest are not there. She said she would sleep, sometimes maybe go to bed at 9, and at about 12 or 1, the employer would wake her up and say, you've slept for 3 hours, that's enough. Now there's work to be done. She would have like 3 hours of sleep. And she said one of the days she was really tired and she was looking after a small child. I don't know what happened, and the child charged the iron, and the child got bent. It wasn't a severe bend, but she was really bent, which I would say she wasn't that careful, or maybe she was that tired. I'm sorry for what happened to the child. But when the mom got home, she took the same iron, blacked it, and bent the domestic worker on both cheeks. So it was those 3 videos that I watched, and it's not only happening in the Middle East. It's happening in many countries. I have not seen those of Africa. I know that it is there. It's because maybe they just don't have much of the technology to upload the videos or that. But I know that it is there. It is there in South America. It is there all over the world. And it is said that even in our country, where we live in Ireland, a country that is a developed country, it is happening. I know that it exists. I've experienced it myself. So what I wanted to highlight is just really what is happening to women that work as domestic workers. And I didn't want only to focus on Domestic Workers Action Group. I will talk about Domestic Workers Action Group shortly because Domestic Workers Action Group is in my heart. But I wanted to stress that it is happening all over the world. Domestic workers are not seen as workers in the society. They are not treated well. They are discriminated. It's not everybody who does that. It's not everybody. Other employers are really good, but there are many women that have worked. In our group, we have women who have had so many different experiences. some having been working for 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, for a salary as little as 50 euro to 400 euro. I was earning 400 euro a month for those hours. To me, it was like one of the highest salary, because I know in my group there are women that have worked for 50 euro a month or for nothing for almost 5 years or 6 years, because they were told you are paying back the ticket that we bought for a plane to bring you here. And the treatment, women work on public holidays, they don't get paid any extra pay or any extra off day. When they're unwell, they are not expected to see a doctor because they are not normal human beings. They are just servants. Why should they take a day off to go to a doctor when they're not feeling well? And these are the people that we entrust our children with, and we treat them that way. And the employers do expose their children to such kind of treatment, which I find really, really sad. Back to Domestic Workers Action Group, looking at the video that you just saw of our own women. Domestic Workers Action Group was established a few years after Migrant Rights Centre Ireland was set up in 2001. Domestic Workers Action Group was set in 2004. At first, it was like a support group for women really working as domestic workers. They were dropping in MRCI to ask about their rights, to complain about how they were being treated, how everything really regarding how much they were supposed to be paid, the hours, and what the conditions, were they supposed to have contracts and all that. So the group started as a support group, but it has grown really, really big. It has become a dynamic group. We are well known for the work that we do. We empower women. We have moved from looking at individual cases, like of those women that are in my group or myself. We've moved from looking at individual cases, but to a more bigger picture that, okay, fine, women in this continent, in that continent, or here in Dublin, in Cork, or in Kilkenny, they have the same issues. So what do we do about that? Do we sit around every day and cry and say, oh, I was so exploited. My employer took my passport and I was not allowed out of the house. Yes, that happened to me. But I decided that I was not going to sit around and feel sorry for myself all the time that I was so exploited. I was going to go and stand up for myself and hold hands with other workers and other women and say, enough is enough. Slavery was abolished so many years ago. We are not going to take to being exploited. We're not going to let a generation that is coming behind us to be exploited again. So we empower women. The women that you see, like myself today, if you had seen me, Aoife Smith, who is our coordinator of the Domestic Workers Action Group, many other people that have known me in the last 2 years, I wouldn't have been able to stand here today and talk like this. I was a person that was even ashamed to say my name because of the way I was treated. The way when you're treated like you're subhuman, you accept it and you end up living it. And where there are people, you always go to the back of the crowd. You're afraid to shake people's hand. You're afraid to look people in the eyes because you feel inferior. That's how I was like. But the empowerment that I got from the Domestic Workers Action Group and Migrant Rights Centre today, it leaves me emotional because sometimes I look at myself and think that that's not me. That's not me because I'm in a way that I'm so happy, I'm so positive that 2 years ago, I was in that house. I couldn't leave the house, not allowed to go out. I had my passport taken, working 6 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day for 400 euro a month. And when the final month, I wasn't paid even a cent for 30 days of work, and it happened here in Dublin. But I said to myself, I'm not going to walk around with that ghost. What I'm going to do is to make sure to fight and make sure that the next girl who is behind that door, I'm going to make sure that she doesn't experience that. And I mean it, which is why I got up and I looked for work. I looked to get empowered. Obviously, I needed to be educated to be able to do this. Migrants' Rights Centre did that. And I'm happy that today I'm in NUI Maynooth with all the support of the Social Studies Department, the whole team, they've been behind me, and thank you very much for that. You have no idea what it means to me. So having said that, women, when they get empowered, in South Africa we have a saying that says when you strike a woman, you strike a rock. It doesn't mean that we don't feel it when we're being struck, but it means how strong we are, that we don't break easily. So which is what we do. I'm going to talk about the main campaign that we do this year for domestic workers not domestic workers only in Ireland, but it's an international campaign by the International Labour Organization, the 12-12 campaign. It is a campaign to get 12 countries to ratify the ILO for domestic workers, decent work for domestic workers. In 2011, last year, Ireland voted a yes to the ILO. It was a struggle that took about 63 years for women, for the domestic issues, domestic workers' issues to be brought to the International Council, to be discussed at international level. They were trying for 63 years, and it finally got on the agenda and it was voted in last year. But it doesn't end there. It has to be ratified so that more women can be protected that are working as domestic workers all over the globe. It's not an Irish campaign, it's a global campaign. So far, we've had 3 countries ratify the ILO. The first country a few months ago was Uruguay, and then the second a few months later, the following month was the Philippines, because we all know the Philippines have a long history of sending their people, domestic workers, to different countries, so they had to make sure that their people are protected wherever they are. So they ratified. And then just, I think, 2 weeks ago, the third country was Mauritius. I heard they are going to host the PGA, which is the People's Global Action on Migration, Human Rights and Development this year. So they had to do that. But they were the first African country to ratify the ILO. And what we're doing this year is to try and ensure that Ireland, where we live, Ireland, our home, where we have experienced this abuse, this exploitation, to push the government that there is need for domestic workers, for the workers that are vulnerable in the society, to be protected. We understand that we are migrants. We understand that our issues are pushed aside because we are women. We understand, because there is the equality issue as well to it. We also understand that domestic workers are not considered normal workers or real workers. A friend of mine once said to me, Mariamm, what do you do? And I say to her, I work as a childminder, because that's what I did and that's what I still do. And I proudly say I'm a domestic worker. And she said, oh, so you don't really have a real job. And I was upset, and I said, what do you mean I don't have a real job? Because I felt that she works in a salon or a beautician herself, and she felt that she had a better job than me, and I take my job seriously. I wake up in the morning and make sure, with a smile, now that I work for a better family, that I'm going to work, and it feels good to be able to feel, not just to feel that gap, but to be able to provide that love to that child who needs it. It just feels so good. It gives you that satisfaction. So this campaign that we have is a 12-12 campaign, and it's an ongoing campaign. On Saturday, that is coming, I don't know if I have free air, but before I go, I would like to say we have a solidarity march, and this solidarity march was planned by Domestic Workers Action Group, but everybody's invited to it. We are trying to make an awareness about domestic work, to send a political message that Ireland needs to ratify ILO. Ireland needs to end modern-day slavery. We have applied for the presidency, we, meaning Ireland, because I feel part of this society now. We have applied for the presidency of the EU next year. We have to set an example that we respect human rights. And I know that Ireland are well known for being a champion, for seeking human rights. They've done that for so many years. So how come there are people that are facing issues that are human rights issues, but they are being ignored? So we want them to ratify the ILO. And that campaign really is going to help and minimize the abuse that is happening in Ireland. There's so many cases. In the last, I think, 4 years, MRCI have uncovered 150 cases of slavery-like conditions, and half of those cases were of domestic workers, and half of that number were domestic workers that were working for foreign diplomats working in Ireland. And those are people that have close link with the government. We bring the issues forward, but because of the diplomatic immunity, it's really hard to get anything done. I will just go shortly, but I will leave a message that as domestic workers today, we respond to those challenges that domestic workers face. We are a group that empower, we educate women. If today we hear that a woman is going through some difficulties, even if it's in the middle of the night, we do that. But what we need, we will get up and try and make sure we do our best to get that woman out of that house. But what we need is support. We don't have enough resources to do that. We need the government to help us. Even if we take those people out of those situations, where do we take them? Because there isn't even place for them. I was taken out of that house with the help of the immigration, but they took me to an asylum seekers hostel where I lived for 8 months until I said to them, can I opt out and try to go to college and do something? Because I can't live here and wait for somebody to decide what my fate will be whenever. I don't know when. So we need the Irish government to act on this. I think that is all. Besides that, please do come to the Solidarity March on Saturday. It is a march to send a message that we need the ILO for domestic workers ratified. It's also to show solidarity with women all over the world. The women that I just mentioned, that the lady that lost her life and many other women that cannot be, they are in countries where they cannot stand up for themselves, where organizing themselves is not allowed. But we're in solidarity with them, and we're going to march in the streets of Dublin, holding all the flags of all the countries and saying, we are with you wherever you are our sisters, but we need support, we need Irish government to ratify the ILO. Thank you very much.